On December 1st, 1944, near the German frontier at Beek, Lieutenant Alfred Rose sat in the open turret of his tank destroyer, still learning the controls, when something moved on the ridge to the northeast. A panther. He checked the range through his telescopic sight and adjusted the graduated reticle. 4,600 yards, the last number engraved on the glass. There was nothing beyond it. He fired anyway. The round flew for approximately 5 to 6 seconds before impact. At that distance, the panther appeared roughly the size of a thumbnail held at arm's length. Rose's first 2 shots were ranging rounds. The third struck. He continued firing armor-piercing and high-explosive rounds until the target burned. 2.5 miles, a target he could barely see. A shot modern tanks with laser rangefinders and computerized fire control struggled to make on the first round. Rose did it with a 5-power optical sight, manual calculations, and a gun whose reticle simply stopped at the number he needed. This is the story of the M36 gun motor carriage, the open-topped, thin-skinned tank destroyer that became America's only reliable answer to the Panther and the Tiger, a weapon so desperately needed that the Army built it on 3 completely different hulls because one was not enough. A weapon whose most obvious flaw, no roof, was a deliberate engineering choice, and a weapon that proved so effective it destroyed the very branch it was built to serve. Because once the Army realized you could put the 90mm gun in an actual tank, there was no reason to build tank destroyers anymore. To understand why the M36 had to exist, you need to understand the crisis that nearly broke American armored forces in the summer of 1944. The Army's existing tank destroyers, the M10 Wolverine and the M18 Hellcat, carried guns that could not kill a Panther from the front at any range. The M10's 3-inch gun and the M18's 76mm fired projectiles at nearly identical velocities, achieving roughly 88 to 93mm of penetration at 500 yards. A Panther's glacis plate was 80mm of steel angled at 55 degrees, producing an effective thickness exceeding 139mm. The mathematics did not work. American shells hit that slope and skipped off like stones across water. In August of 1944, 12th Army Group ordered firing trials at Isigny, France, against captured Panther hulks. Crews fired every American anti-tank round in the inventory at ranges from 100 yards to 1,000 yards. The results were devastating. The 3-inch armor-piercing round would not penetrate the Panther's front slope plate at 200 yards. 200 yards. Close enough to see the faces of the crew if the hatches were open. Close enough that the Panther's 88mm gun could penetrate the M10's armor from any angle, through any part of the vehicle, with ammunition that had been standard since 1942. The test crews repeated the trials, then repeated them again. The answer did not change. Against the Panther's glacis, the 76mm round was ballistically useless at any practical engagement range. The report went to General Omar Bradley at 12th Army Group. Bradley forwarded it to Eisenhower. The results reached Eisenhower. His response became infamous. Ordnance told me this 76 would take care of anything the Germans had. Now I find you can't knock out a damn thing with it. The field consequences were measured in lives. At Roré on July 10, 1944, the 899th Tank Destroyer Battalion destroyed 12 Panthers at less than 200 meters. Point-blank range. Engagements where both vehicles could see through each other's vision blocks. Engagements where a crew had half a second to react before the German gun found them. The M10s were killing Panthers, but the geometry required was suicidal. Ambush from the flank. Minimum range, maximum exposure. Every one of those 12 kills required an American crew to position their lightly armored vehicle within the Panther's lethal envelope and hope they fired first. At Caen in July, the 1st Northamptonshire Yeomanry lost 11 Shermans in 14 minutes to Panthers they never saw. American M10 crews watching from the flanks understood the message clearly. The German armor did not need to find you. It just needed to turn around. Hit the subscribe button right now, because this channel is the only place showing you the actual engineering mathematics that won and lost battles. Not tanks versus tanks, not heroes versus villains, but penetration rates at 500 yards. Effective armor thickness after angle calculations. The difference between 88mm and 139mm measured in dead crews. Every single week, we break down another weapon that experts said would work and didn't, or said wouldn't work and saved thousands. Subscribe so you don't miss how a gun with no roof became the only thing standing between panzer armies and open roads. What American forces needed was a mobile gun that could engage heavy German armor from the front at range before the enemy's superior weapons turned the exchange into a death sentence. That gun already existed. The 90mm M3. The heaviest anti-tank weapon America could mount on a mobile chassis. It offered 30 to 40% greater penetration than anything else in the arsenal. It had existed since 1942, but the men who controlled army procurement had spent 2 years debating whether soldiers actually needed it. By the time the first M36 reached France in October of 1944, the troops it was designed to protect had been fighting Panthers for 4 months with weapons that could not touch them from the front. The procurement delay was not accidental, it was institutional. Major General Andrew Bruce, commanding the Tank Destroyer Center at Camp Hood, Texas, opposed the M36. He wanted the lightweight M18 Hellcat. His philosophy was elegantly simple: speed over firepower, a cruiser rather than a battleship. He considered the M36 too heavy and too slow. He was overruled by the Ordnance Department. The weapon he opposed became the most effective American tank destroyer of the war. The weapon he championed saw its 76mm gun rendered inadequate by the very Panthers it was supposed to kill. Even with approval, the M36 nearly died twice in bureaucratic crossfire. Army ground forces initially denied full production because the 90mm was already earmarked for the T-26 Pershing, a tank that would not fire a shot in combat until February of 1945. Then in spring of 1944, weeks before the invasion of Normandy, the army in Europe was offered M36s to replace its M10s. It declined. That single rejection cost months. When Panthers appeared in Normandy in June, the only weapon that could reliably kill them from the front was sitting in a stateside depot waiting for procurement officers to decide it was actually needed. The heart of the M36 was not the vehicle, it was the gun. The 90mm M3 descended directly from America's primary heavy anti-aircraft weapon, the 90mm M1, in exactly the way Germany's famous 88 began life shooting at bombers before someone pointed it at tanks. The anti-aircraft lineage gave the gun two defining qualities: a flat trajectory and enormous muzzle velocity. The standard M82 armor-piercing round left the barrel at 2,800 feet per second and punched through 129mm of steel at 500 yards. That meant a Panther's turret mantlet at 1,000 yards, a Tiger I's flat frontal hull at roughly the same distance, and for crews lucky enough to receive the rare tungsten core high-velocity round, which most never did, penetration jumped to 221mm, enough to defeat even a King Tiger's turret at 800 yards. The gun sat in an open-top turret mounted on a repurposed M10 hull. 29 tons, 450 horsepower Ford V8, a crew of 5, and no roof. This was not an accident. 5 interlocking reasons produced that open top, and everyone revealed the philosophy that built the weapon. Weight savings came first. The massive 90mm breech and its ammunition demanded interior space a roof would have restricted. The turret ring on the M36 was wider than the M10's to accommodate the larger gun. Adding a roof would have pushed total weight past 32 tons, straining the Ford V8 powertrain and reducing the vehicle's already limited cross-country mobility. Second, the turret designers turned a structural requirement into engineering elegance. A turret housing a gun as heavy as the 90mm M3 needed counterbalance. The M10 solved this crudely, using cast-iron ballast blocks in the turret bustle that added weight without contributing function. M36 designers replaced those dead weight blocks with 11 ready rounds of 90mm ammunition stored in the bustle. The ammunition was the counterbalance, functional mass, until a single penetrating hit to the turret rear detonated your ready rack and killed every man in the vehicle instantly. The design was elegant. The risk was accepted because the alternative was slower. Third, visibility. The tank destroyer doctrine assumed crews would be engaging from ambush positions, identifying targets at distance before those targets identified them. A commander standing in an open turret could observe through 360 degrees without obstruction. The same commander buttoned up behind armored glass could see perhaps 45 degrees clearly. In a vehicle whose survival depended on seeing the enemy before being seen, that difference was measured in seconds. Those seconds were lives. Fourth, cost. Lieutenant General Leslie McNair, commanding Army Ground Forces, had made his position blunt and repeated it constantly. It is poor economy to use a $35,000 medium tank to destroy another tank when the job can be done by a gun costing a fraction as much. The M36 cost approximately $30,000 to produce. An M4 Sherman cost $44,000. An M26 Pershing would cost $83,000. McNair's arithmetic was simple. Build more guns, accept more exposure, and fifth, doctrine itself. The entire tank destroyer concept, the philosophy McNair and Bruce had built the tank destroyer branch around since 1941, assumed these vehicles would never absorb a direct hit. Tank destroyers did not fight, they ambushed. They fired from concealment, destroyed the target, displaced before the enemy could locate them, and repeated the cycle. If the enemy was shooting at you, something had already gone catastrophically wrong. You had already lost the engagement before it started. The open turret was that assumption made physical. It was the doctrine's clearest statement of intent, rendered in steel and absence. Production finally began at the Fisher Tank Arsenal in Grand Blanc, Michigan, in April of 1944. The urgency produced something almost unprecedented. When M10 hulls ran out, engineers bolted M36 turrets onto Sherman hulls, creating the M36B1 in a crash program that went from concept to combat in weeks. A third variant used the original M10 hull with twin diesel engines. One weapon, three completely different bodies. Total production across all variants reached roughly 2,300 vehicles. The first 600 shipped without muzzle brakes. Crews firing the 90mm in combat were essentially blinding themselves with every shot. The concussive muzzle blast obliterated the gunner's field of view and slowed the rate of fire until a double baffle brake was hastily fitted starting in November. By December 20th, 1944, 4 days into the German Ardennes offensive, only 236 M36s were in combat across the entire European theater. Those few hundred vehicles became the backbone of American anti-armor defense during the worst crisis of the Western War. At Stoumont, in the desperate scramble to stop the lead German spearhead, Staff Sergeant Charlie Lupi drew an M36 from the repair depot at Sprimont. Neither he nor his gunner, Corporal William Beckman, had ever seen an M36 before. They figured out how to start it, drove it into position, and Beckman put 3 rounds from the 90mm into a Panther until it burned. 2 men, a weapon they had never touched, and a kill on their first engagement. The gun was that good. The defense of Saint-Vith proved what 236 open-top tank destroyers could do when nothing else stood between a Panzer army and an open road. Saint-Vith was a road junction. 5 paved roads converged there. Whoever held Saint-Vith controlled movement across a 30-kilometer front. 5th Panzer Army needed it by December 17th to maintain the offensive schedule that Field Marshal Model had promised Hitler. 76s from the 814th Tank Destroyer Battalion formed the direct fire backbone of the defense, alongside the 7th Armored Division's Shermans and infantry from the 106th Division. The geometry of the engagement favored the 90mm gun. German armor approached along roads because the frozen Ardennes terrain off the roads was impassable for tanks. The roads funneled Panthers and Tigers into predictable approach corridors. The M36s covered those corridors from hull-down positions where only the turret was exposed. A Sherman in the same position had a gun that could not penetrate the Panther frontally at any range. An M36 in the same position could kill at 1,000 yards. When German armored thrusts hit the American positions, the 90mm guns broke them. The Panthers that survived the M36 fire became targets for bazooka teams in the frozen streets. When pressure eased, Sherman tank companies counterattacked to prevent German infantry from bypassing the tank destroyer screen. The German timetable demanded Saint-Vith by 1800 hours on December 17th. It did not fall until December 21st. 4 days. 4 days that disrupted the German logistical schedule so severely that armored spearheads ran out of fuel short of the Meuse River. After the war, German General Hasso von Manteuffel, commanding 5th Panzer Army during the Ardennes offensive, was asked to describe the defense of Saint-Vith. He stated that the American resistance convinced him he was facing an entire armored corps. He had been stopped by a thin screen of infantry, a handful of Shermans, and a line of tank destroyers whose 90mm guns were the only American weapons on that front capable of stopping what he sent at them. Manteuffel's 5th Panzer Army had 300 tanks. The Americans defending Saint-Vith had fewer than 40 functional armored vehicles. The M36's gun had equalized that imbalance enough to hold 4 days. On the Roer Plain, the 702nd Tank Destroyer Battalion provided the clearest statistical proof of the 90mm superiority. 3 battalions of Shermans from the 67th Armored Regiment destroyed 5 Panthers. The M36-equipped 702nd destroyed 15. 3 times the kill rate with fewer vehicles. Subscribe to this channel right now and turn on all notifications, because what you just heard is the mathematics that win battles. 5 Panthers versus 15 Panthers, with the same number of vehicles, same terrain, same enemy. The only difference was the gun. 76mm versus 90mm. That difference is 3-to-1 in kill rates, and the reason American tank design changed permanently after this war. We're the only channel breaking down exactly how weapon performance translates into tactical outcomes measured in confirmed kills. Hit subscribe so you don't miss how this same gun killed the entire tank destroyer concept by being too good at the job. And it was in that same region, with the 814th Tank Destroyer Battalion, that Lieutenant Rose fired at the last number on his sight. 4,600 yards, 2.5 miles. To understand what Rose did, you need to understand what firing at 4,600 yards actually means with a 1944 weapons system. At that range, the 90mm shell takes approximately 5 to 6 seconds from firing to impact. 5 seconds during which the target can move, the wind can shift, and the gunner is blind in the muzzle blast. The Panther on the ridge appeared roughly the size of a thumbnail held at arm's length. There are no reference points at that scale, no way to estimate range precisely, no way to judge whether the target is stationary or moving. The graduated reticle on Rose's 5-power sight ended at 4,600 yards because the designers assumed that was the maximum practical range. They were not wrong, they just had not met Alfred Rose. Rose's first 2 shots were ranging rounds, their impact points invisible at that distance, corrected by adjusting elevation using the reticle graduation pattern. The third struck. He continued firing armor-piercing and high-explosive rounds until the target burned. The geometry tells us something extraordinary. The Panther's front glacis at 150 yards deflects a 90mm round because the angle of impact allows the slope to work. At 4,600 yards, the same round arrives at a steep downward angle following a ballistic arc and strikes the thinner roof armor and upper hull deck that the slope cannot protect. The tank was more vulnerable at maximum range than it would have been up close. Distance, paradoxically, was safety for Rose and danger for the Panther. Modern tanks with laser rangefinders measure distance to within 1 meter and calculate firing solutions in milliseconds. Rose did it with a 5-power optical sight, mental arithmetic, and a gun whose reticle stopped at the last number, engraved on the glass. But the M36's greatest asset created its most dangerous flaw. The open turret that gave commanders unmatched visibility also gave the enemy a direct path into the fighting compartment. German artillery crews learned quickly. The preferred tactic was calling an airburst directly above tank destroyers. Shells detonating in midair, sending shrapnel straight down through the open top. Nothing but a fully armored roof could stop it. Snipers targeted exposed commanders. In the brutal winter of 1944, the cold itself became a weapon. Crews fought for hours in open steel turrets in temperatures that froze exposed skin in minutes. The men answered with whatever they could find. Andrew Phillips of the 703rd Tank Destroyer Battalion, a skilled welder before the war at a Pittsburgh steel mill, cut 3-inch steel plates from destroyed vehicles and welded them to the angled front surface of his M36's turret. Then he did the same for every tank destroyer in his unit he could reach. Working at night with portable welding equipment scrounged from an ordnance depot, Phillips fabricated partial roofs for 6 vehicles before Army supply officers noticed unauthorized modifications were being made to government equipment. The Army response was characteristic. Headquarters issued a memorandum noting that field modifications required engineering authorization. Phillips and his commanding officer pointed out that the men sleeping in open turrets in the Ardennes in December were dying from airburst artillery and sniper fire, while the engineering authorization process ran its course. The memorandum was filed. The welding continued. Other crews developed their own solutions. Canvas shelter halves draped over the turret opening to deflect grenades thrown from rooftops in village fighting. Fabric against explosives. It worked until it caught fire. Sandbags stacked on the hull reduced the damage radius from near-miss airburst rounds. Spare track links strapped to vertical surfaces added 10 to 15 millimeters of additional armor against small arms at the cost of added weight that stressed the suspension. Some crews found German steel plate from destroyed Panther hulls, cut it with acetylene torches, and bolted it over the turret opening. German armor protecting American crews in American vehicles with guns that killed German tanks. The Ardennes improvisation was complete. The Army eventually developed an official folding armored roof kit based on reports of what crews were doing in the field. It was standardized in August of 1945. Germany had surrendered in May. The official solution arrived 3 months after it was no longer needed. Every modification added weight, slowed the vehicle, reduced the visibility advantage that justified the open turret, and contradicted the design philosophy that built the weapon. The men who crewed the M36 were, with every sandbag and every welded plate, writing a critique of their own vehicle's doctrine in steel and improvisation. The open turret reflected a world where tank destroyers ambushed from concealment and ran before the enemy could respond. The welded scrap reflected the world where they stood and fought like the tanks they were never supposed to be. And in standing and fighting, the M36 answered a question the Army had been avoiding for 3 years. If the 90mm gun worked this well in a thin-skinned vehicle with no roof, what would it do in a real tank? The answer arrived in February of 1945, when the M26 Pershing entered combat, carrying the same M3 gun. From the Pershing, the 90mm caliber became the standard American tank armament for the next 15 years. The M46 Patton, the M47, the M48. Every major American tank built between 1945 and 1960 traced its primary weapon directly to the gun that sat in the M36's open turret. The 1945 General Board recommended disbanding the tank destroyer branch entirely. The logic was devastating and simple. Now that tanks could carry the same gun, there was no reason for a separate lightly armored force to carry it for them. The Tank Destroyer Center at Fort Hood closed on November 10, 1945. The final conclusion was blunt. No functional difference between a tank destroyer and a medium tank exists when both carry 90mm guns. Put the big gun on the tank. The M36 had proven the concept so effectively that the concept no longer needed a separate vehicle. The weapon killed its own branch, but the vehicle refused to disappear. Yugoslavia received 399 M36s under the Military Assistance Program in the 1950s. Marshal Tito's engineers studied the vehicle and made a decision that revealed how good the basic concept was. They kept the gun. They changed everything else. Yugoslav engineers ripped out the Ford GA V8 gasoline engines and replaced them with Soviet diesel power plants salvaged from T-34 tanks, cutting through the firewall to accommodate the different engine dimensions. The conversion was brutal engineering, not elegant integration, but it worked. The diesel engines extended operational range and eliminated the gasoline fire hazard that had made burning M36s a common sight in the Ardennes. They added infrared night vision equipment from Soviet stocks, giving the M36 a capability it never had from the factory. They issued Yugoslav-manufactured 90mm ammunition designed to meet 1960s armor standards, capable of penetrating 300mm of rolled homogeneous armor, compared to the original M82's 129mm. A weapon designed in 1943 was being kept relevant in 1970 through engineering investment that its original operators never planned for. When Yugoslavia tore itself apart in 1991, those M36s went to war again. In Slovenia, where the 10-day War of Independence saw them deployed against Yugoslav federal armor. In Croatia, where the 1991 campaign featured urban fighting in Vukovar, in which M36s provided direct fire support for infantry in conditions the vehicles had never been designed for. In Bosnia, through a 4-year siege. In Kosovo, in 1999. During the NATO air campaign in 1999, Serbian military planners used surviving M36s as thermal decoys, positioning them in open fields to attract heat-seeking sensors from paveway-guided munitions away from modern T-72 and T-55 tanks concealed in tree lines. A 1944 design with a heat signature different from modern vehicles was functioning as a countermeasures system. NATO aircraft expended precision-guided munitions on 50-year-old tank destroyers, while the intended targets moved. The last M36 in Yugoslav service was retired in 2004. 60 years after the first one left the Fisher tank arsenal in Grand Blanc, Michigan. It outlived by decades the country that built it and the country that ultimately adopted it. On Kinmen Island, Taiwan, 2 M36s remain in their original combat fortifications today, turrets oriented toward mainland China across the strait. They have been in those positions since the 1950s. They have not been operational in decades, but they have never been removed because their presence in the fortifications is itself the statement. Subscribe to this channel immediately and turn on all notifications, because next week we're breaking down another weapon that was so good it made itself obsolete. The 88mm flak gun that Germany never intended for tanks. The proximity fuse that made anti-aircraft gunnery so effective, it eliminated the need for fighters at certain altitudes. The Sherman Firefly that the British built when America refused to put bigger guns in tanks. Every single week, we show you the engineering paradoxes that changed doctrine, because someone built something experts said was impossible or unnecessary. This is not entertainment. This is education you won't find anywhere else. Hit subscribe right now. Then hit the like button so YouTube shows this to more people who need to understand that military innovation comes from necessity, not planning. Drop a comment telling us where you're watching from and what weapon system paradox you want us to cover next. Should the M36 have had a roof? Would the visibility loss have cost more lives than the protection saved? Veterans, engineers, and armor enthusiasts, we want your analysis. Thank you for watching. And thank you for understanding that the M36 rushed to the front 2 years late, built on 3 different hulls because one was not enough, with a hole where the roof should have been, became the only thing in the American arsenal that could reach out to the edge of what optics could measure and kill what nothing else could touch. The engineers gave it a hole where the roof should have been. The crews gave it a war. The gun gave it everything else. And in proving that a 90mm gun could work in a tank destroyer, the M36 proved that every American tank after 1945 should carry one. The weapon was so effective, it killed the entire concept of separate tank destroyers. That is the ultimate engineering paradox. Success that makes itself obsolete. Subscribe now. The next weapon paradox drops in 7 days.